Have you ever noticed how a narcissist seems to feed on your reactions, your emotions, your confusion, your pain? They pull the strings and you dance until one day you stop. That silence, that peace, it's not weakness. It's power, and today I'll show you the 4 strategic moves that quietly turn the tables without ever playing their game again. Silence is not weakness, it's your greatest form of strength. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding their need for control. A narcissist thrives in noise, the arguments, the explanations, the desperate attempts to make them see your heart. Every word, every tear, every reaction becomes fuel for their ego. They want you tangled, uncertain, off balance. They want you to keep proving your worth, defending your truth, questioning your reality. But the moment you fall silent, truly silent, not in anger, but in peace, the entire dynamic shifts. Silence is not submission. It's not giving up, it's mastery. It's emotional discipline, the kind that comes when you finally understand you don't need to convince anyone of your value. You stop responding to manipulation because you've learned that no amount of explaining can make someone with no empathy suddenly develop it. You stop engaging because you've realized that energy spent defending yourself is energy stolen from your healing. At first, the silence feels uncomfortable. It feels unnatural, even cruel. The narcissist senses your withdrawal and tries harder to provoke a response. They might love, bomb, guilt trip, or rage, anything to break your calm, but that's the test. Your silence is a mirror, and they can't stand what it reflects back, their own emptiness. They thrive on reaction because reaction gives them identity. Without it, they're left alone with the void they spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Your silence, then, becomes the most powerful statement you can make. It says, you no longer have access to my emotions. It says, your chaos no longer dictates my peace. It's a quiet rebellion that dismantles the entire structure of their control. When you stop feeding the fire, it burns itself out. In that stillness, something extraordinary happens. You begin to hear yourself again. You begin to trust your intuition, to feel the quiet strength of self-respect growing in you. You no longer seek validation from someone who profits from your doubt. You learn that peace isn't passive, it's active, intentional, and deeply rooted in self-worth. And the narcissist, they can't fight silence, they can't manipulate calm. When their tactics fail to provoke you, they grow frustrated, confused, exposed. The power dynamic they once controlled begins to crumble, not because you fought harder, but because you stopped fighting at all. Silence teaches you boundaries in the most profound way. It reminds you that not every battle deserves your voice, that not every person deserves access to your emotions, that sometimes the most powerful way to say no is to say nothing at all. So when you feel the pull to explain, to defend, to prove, pause. Remember that your silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the moment you reclaim your energy, your dignity, your truth. It's the sound of freedom, quiet, steady, and unshakably strong. Because real power doesn't roar, real power breathes deeply, stands tall, and says absolutely nothing. You don't owe a narcissist explanations, closure, or understanding. Every time you justify yourself, you hand them emotional power. This is one of the hardest lessons to learn when you've been conditioned to explain, to defend, to fix. Especially when dealing with a narcissist, someone who thrives on confusion, who deliberately twists your intentions, and who makes you believe that if you could just explain it better, they'd finally understand. But the truth is, they don't want to understand. Understanding would mean accountability, and accountability would mean losing control. When you explain yourself to a narcissist, you're entering a game you can never win. They listen not to comprehend, but to gather ammunition. Your explanations become weapons in their next manipulation. Every word you offer in defense is another opening for them to distort your meaning and keep you trapped in the cycle of justification. It feels like conversation, but it's really control disguised as dialogue. There comes a moment in your healing when you realize that silence and distance are more powerful than explanations and reasoning. When you stop giving them the satisfaction of your emotional responses, you stop participating in their reality. You begin to live in your own truth, one that doesn't need to be defended. You don't need them to see your heart to know it's good. You don't need them to agree with your story for it to be valid. The desire to explain often comes from your empathy, from your deep wish to be understood, to resolve tension, to create peace. But peace doesn't come from proving your point. It comes from accepting that some people are committed to misunderstanding you. Narcissists don't want resolution, they want reaction. The more you try to clarify, the more they twist your words. The more you try to justify, the more they use it to invalidate you. It's a loop that drains your energy and feeds their ego. True strength comes from restraint, from the ability to walk away without the need to explain why. You don't owe anyone access to your reasoning, especially not someone who has consistently weaponized it against you. Your no doesn't require a paragraph. Your decision doesn't need a debate. Your boundaries don't require validation. This is what reclaiming power looks like. You stop performing emotional labor for people who never intend to meet you halfway. You stop chasing closure from those who benefit from keeping the door open. You stop trying to make them see because you finally see clearly and without distortion. And yes, it will feel strange at first. You might feel guilty for not responding, not explaining, not engaging. But over time, that guilt transforms into peace. You begin to notice the quiet strength that comes with not needing to be understood. You realize that your energy is precious, your truth sacred, and your boundaries divine. Because when you stop explaining, you stop negotiating your worth. You stop shrinking yourself to fit their version of you. And in that stillness, in that refusal to justify, you become untouchable, calm, grounded, and free. Emotional detachment is protection, not punishment. Staying calm and grounded turns their chaos into background noise. When you've lived in the storm of a narcissist's world, emotional detachment feels almost impossible. They are experts at pulling you in, provoking you, and making you feel responsible for their moods. Every sigh, every silence, every accusation feels personal, as if your worth depends on their approval. But emotional detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the moment you stop letting their chaos define your emotional weather. Detaching doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying asterisk. You stop carrying their guilt, their anger, their projections. You start recognizing that their emotions are their own, a reflection of their inner instability, not your shortcomings. Narcissists want you to believe that if you loved them more, obeyed them more, or proved yourself better, things would be peaceful. But peace doesn't come from compliance. It comes from boundaries. Emotional detachment is an internal shift. It's when you stop reacting automatically and start responding intentionally. You see their manipulation, but you don't absorb it. You hear their insults, but you don't internalize them. You recognize their drama, but you don't participate in it. You become an observer instead of a victim, aware, steady, and calm. This calmness is what disarms them most. Narcissists feed on reactions, the tears, the anger, the arguments. They want to know they can still pull your strings. When you remain unbothered, when you respond with quiet composure, it exposes their powerlessness. They can't manipulate what no longer reacts. They can't control what no longer fears, but achieving emotional detachment takes practice. It begins with mindfulness, noticing when you're being triggered, breathing before you respond, choosing silence over defensiveness. It's about learning that you don't need to prove anything to someone who's already decided who you are in their mind. You begin to master the pause, the sacred moment between what they do and how you choose to respond. That pause is power. It's where you take back control. Detachment also means releasing the fantasy that they'll ever change because of your love or sacrifice. Narcissists rarely change because change requires self-awareness and humility. two qualities they resist. When you finally accept that, your energy shifts from trying to fix them to healing yourself. You start to rebuild the parts of you that were silenced, doubted, or dismissed. Eventually, the same words that once triggered pain will barely register. The same manipulations that once hooked you will feel predictable and empty. That's when you'll know you've detached, when their drama no longer shakes your peace, when their opinion no longer defines your worth. Emotional detachment isn't revenge, it's recovery. It's the quiet reclaiming of your sanity after years of being emotionally hijacked. It's how you rise without fighting, how you heal without explaining, how you finally see that peace isn't something they can give or take away. It's something you create within yourself, and it's something they'll never understand. Boundaries are silent armor. You don't argue for peace, you create it and protect it. Boundaries are not walls to shut people out. They are gates that protect what's sacred inside you. When you've dealt with a narcissist, you learn that boundaries are not optional, they're survival. A narcissist doesn't respect your limits, your time, or your emotions. They see your empathy as an entry point, your kindness as permission, and your forgiveness as opportunity. That's why boundaries aren't something you discuss with them. They're something you enforce quietly and consistently. At first, setting boundaries feels selfish or even cruel. You've been trained to believe that saying no makes you unkind. But boundaries are the highest form of self-respect. They say, I value myself enough to protect my peace. You stop answering calls that drain you. You stop explaining why you need space. You stop letting every crisis become your responsibility. Because the truth is, peace doesn't require permission, it requires discipline. A narcissist will test every line you draw. They'll push, guilt trip, and provoke, trying to make you feel bad for prioritizing yourself. They'll say you've changed, become distant, or that you're the problem, and that's okay. Because every time you uphold a boundary, you remind yourself that their comfort is not your job. You're not here to keep them calm, you're here to keep yourself whole. The beauty of silent boundaries is that they don't rely on arguments or explanations. You don't have to justify why you're not responding to a text or why you're leaving a conversation that turns toxic. You simply act in alignment with your truth. You protect your energy by choice, not by reaction. And that quiet consistency confuses a narcissist more than any confrontation ever could. They can't fight what they can't engage. Over time, these boundaries begin to rebuild your sense of self. You start to feel safe within your own life again. You realize that you don't have to be constantly on edge, anticipating their next move. You can rest, you can breathe, you can exist without walking on emotional eggshells. That's what true peace feels like, not the temporary calm that comes from pleasing them, but the lasting serenity that comes from choosing yourself. Boundaries also teach others how to treat you. When you hold them firmly, people who truly love and respect you will honor them. Those who don't will fall away, and though that loss may hurt, it also clears space for something real. Remember, boundaries are not about keeping others out. They're about keeping you in, your power, your dignity, your peace. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to explain to be understood. You don't even need to fight to win. You simply stand firm in your truth, quietly, confidently, and consistently. That is your armor. That is your peace. And that is how you take your life back. The truth doesn't need defending. It reveals itself in time. Patience and consistency expose what manipulation tries to hide. When you've been entangled with a narcissist, one of the deepest wounds comes from not being believed. You try to tell your story, to show others what's happening behind closed doors, but the narcissist always seems one step ahead, charming, persuasive, convincing. They wear a mask so well that you start to question your own reality. You wonder if you're the problem, if maybe you've exaggerated, if your truth even matters. But here's what time teaches you. The truth has a way of surfacing, even when it's buried under layers of deception. A narcissist lives in performance mode. Their life is built on illusion, the perfect image, the fabricated narrative, the constant need to be admired. But no mask lasts forever. The cracks always show. Their charm eventually fades, their lies start to overlap, and the people who once believed them begin to see the inconsistencies. You don't have to rush that process. You don't have to expose them yourself. In fact, trying to will only exhaust you further. The most powerful thing you can do is stand firm in your truth without trying to prove it. You stop defending yourself against their lies because every defense becomes another invitation to argue. You stop seeking validation because your peace no longer depends on anyone's approval. You stop trying to control how others see you because you know time is the ultimate revealer. People may doubt you now, but life has a way of making patterns undeniable. Patience becomes your strength. You remain consistent in your actions, your words, your integrity. While the narcissist's mask slips with every lie they tell, your truth stays steady. That contrast speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. People eventually notice who brings calm and who brings chaos, who takes responsibility and who always shifts blame. The beauty of truth is that it doesn't need defending, it only needs space. It doesn't scream or beg to be believed, it simply stands, unshaken, waiting for time to do its quiet work. And time always does. The narcissist's need for control eventually exposes their insecurity. Their manipulations start to show patterns. Their relationships crumble the same way yours did, and suddenly, the story you tried so hard to explain becomes undeniable. When that day comes, you won't even need to say, "I told you so." You'll be too busy living free, too grounded in your peace to care who finally believes you. Because truth was never about proving them wrong, it was about reclaiming yourself, so let them talk. Let them twist, let them pretend. You don't need to chase justice, it's already unfolding. The truth will always find its way to the surface. And when it does, it won't need an audience. It will simply stand in quiet triumph as you stand beside it, calm, free, and untouchably whole. Your healing is the ultimate revenge. When you rise above the cycle, you break their power forever. For a long time after being entangled with a narcissist, you may dream of justice, of seeing them exposed, humbled, or finally feeling the pain they caused. You want them to understand, to regret, to suffer the way you did. It's a natural human response to betrayal and emotional abuse. But true justice doesn't come from their downfall, it comes from your recovery. Because nothing dismantles a narcissist's illusion of control like your peace, your strength, and your joy returning, piece by piece, without them. Healing isn't glamorous, it's quiet, often lonely, and deeply personal. It's sitting with pain you once ran from. It's unlearning the lies they planted in your mind, that you were unworthy, unlovable, or too much. It's rebuilding trust in yourself, realizing that your empathy wasn't a weakness, it was a superpower that was exploited. Healing means choosing not to become like them, even after being wounded by them. It's deciding that your heart will stay kind but no longer naive. The narcissist wants to believe they broke you. They need that story to feel powerful. When you start to heal, you take that story away. You stop being their victim and start being your own hero. Your calm terrifies them. Your joy confuses them. Your indifference wounds their ego more deeply than your anger ever could. Because your healing means they've lost control not just over your actions, but over your mind, your emotions, your identity. There's nothing louder to a narcissist than the silence of someone who no longer needs them. When you heal, you stop explaining, you stop reacting, and you stop trying to be understood by someone incapable of empathy. You start living again. You laugh without guilt. You rest without fear. You love without needing to prove you deserve it. And that is the truest form of freedom. Healing doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means acknowledging that it did and choosing growth anyway. It's forgiving yourself for staying too long, for hoping too much, for trusting too deeply. It's recognizing that what happened to you says nothing about your worth, and everything about their emptiness. As you grow stronger, you begin to see that revenge is just another form of attachment, and you no longer need it. You don't need to prove they were wrong. You don't need to make them feel what you felt. Their downfall will never heal you, but your transformation will. Because the moment you focus on rebuilding your peace instead of seeking their punishment, you reclaim everything they tried to take: your power, your voice, your self-respect. Your healing is the story they can't rewrite. It's the ending they can't control. It's the mirror they can't bear to face. And in that quiet, radiant strength, you become everything they pretended to be: a whole, grounded, and free. That's not just healing, that's victory.